Who's the lead on that?
Chair, I think the paper's self-explanatory.
It is.
I'll move the recommendation, Mr. Chair.
I'll second it.
Second it. Just a comment, Neil?
No, I'm just looking at.
That's a first.
No, that's fine. I'll just go with that.
And are we going to have a first from you, Councillor Barker?
No comment.
No comment. Okay, any comment from anyone else? All
I'd
those
like
in-
to sum up, though. Write a reply.
I think there's got to be a rule. If you don't come in the first place, you don't get my reply. Okay, all those in favour of accepting
Aye.
this paper? Aye. Thank you very much. We will move.
Bit of progress,
Fixing
Chair.
the commerce. No, we're going to. We'll move to
Annual
item
report,
11.
Chair.
Annual report.
So just to advise council that we have been advised by Audit New Zealand that they have been unable to provide audit sign-off prior to this moment. We had been hoping it would come through today on the annual report. So therefore, we propose that we leave that item on the table for today, and subject to confirmation that they will meet the deadline for a extraordinary meeting of council next week, we will call one, and we will be able to conduct it by Zoom to adopt the annual plan, and therefore we will be compliant with our legislative requirement that this be adopted prior to the 31st of December.
Thank you, James.
Can I move?
Craig, will you move that?
Annual report, not annual plan.
Sorry,
doesn't
annual,
matter.
yeah, right.
I so move.
You'll move that, and you'll second.
I want to amend the resolution.
Well,
You'll talk to the mover.
well, we actually don't have a final annual report, so all we're doing is receiving the draft report to contemplate that for bedtime reading for the next week or so, whilst we wait for official sign-off for the final annual report. So we can't actually receive the report because we don't have the annual report. It's just receiving and noting the draft report, but it's good reading, councillors, if you want to have a learn about the organisation.
Yeah, it's a resolution to leave it on the table.
Leave it on the
That's what I'm
table,
looking for.
absolutely.
And you second that resolution to leave it on the
Well,
table?
there's some other language I want to put into this.
Okay,
Can I put that on the table?
you can.
I want to, that we receive and note, amend Craig's resolution, receive and note the report, leave it on the table. The delay occasioned by Audit New Zealand having not yet completed its work, rendering the Regional Council unable to complete its work.
You sure you want to jab them, Rick?
I do. I did. I've done before. I'll do again. And
Craig, you happy with that?
I don't often argue with Mr. Barker, so I won't in this time.
Okay.
If colleagues are cognizant of that wording, or maybe some different wording along those lines, I'm comfortable with it. A point does need to be made.
Are you happy with that? That's fine. Okay, rightio.
Chairman, before we put the motion, are we going to get asked questions on the covering report?
Well, we're leaving it on the table, so
So it's going to be part of.
part of the second phase.
I'll have a couple of questions on the covering report that I wouldn't mind asking.
do that offline.
No, we're going to take them.
Okay, well, I just, thank you. I didn't understand the relationship between paragraphs, and thank you for the report, by the way, breaking all down the spins and unders and overs. But I didn't understand the relationship between paragraphs paragraphs 2, 3, and 19 of the covering report, where we have an operating surplus of 40 million, but we have a deficit of 3.2 million against a budget surplus of 7 million, and we have operating expenditure that is 5.7 million over budget. So there's obviously a distinction between an operating surplus and a deficit and the over. Yeah. So can you just talk me through that?
So the operating surplus of 40.8 million includes the IPO transaction.
Yes.
So that was a particularly special transaction that wouldn't usually occur in a normal year.
Right.
It was 47.3 million below budget because a significant amount of the nature port funds got left in Nature Brook.
Understand
That's
that.
right.
So it was still a surplus, but not as big as what we'd expected.
But that aside, if you took that out, we've
But
got
if
a deficit.
That's
Is that
right.
what you're saying?
If we strip out the Napier Port transaction, we actually, the year ended in deficit,
3.2.
but mainly because we despite the Napier Port IPO, we didn't receive any income from our managed funds due to COVID, so that occurred at the end of the year.
Okay.
So that's two sort of
Yeah,
exceptional.
I've got that now, thank you, that's helpful.
Chair, can I also just clarify that when it says operating expenditure was over budget, that does also include revenues that were anticipated, were budgeted for that were not received. So an example of that is you'll note in there that it refers to an overspend in consents and compliance by 1.5 million. 400,000 of the 1.5 million is an overspend, and 1.1 million is an under recovery in the cost recovery charges. So it can give a false impression that we have spent that much more than had been budgeted, but in the operating space there is a degree of under recovery that had been budgeted that hasn't come through.
Okay, look, I don't want to get into too much detail because we're going to cover this again later on. So we have a mover and a seconder. Do you wish to speak? Speak? All those in favour?
Aye.
As leaving on the table, subject to the additions which Rick put in. You're on core on item 12, Mr. Barker. Fixing the common seal.
Oh, yes, I moved, Chair, I was catching up.
Oh, well, you'll catch up eventually.
Tell us just too slow.
No, your finger's too slow.
And I hope that you wear full druid dress as you affix the seal.
We have a mover and Jeff seconded. All those in favour of fixing common seal?
All right.
Right, thank you very much. Right, we have item 13, report from the Maori Committee. Mike, would you do that for us?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So look, the report is the same as last time. The only thing that was of interest here was point 11. If you remember from last month, we felt there was a lack of detail that actually covered off the conversation that took place. I believe that's a fair and accurate description of the conversation that happened around Māori wars, and quite clearly outlines the position of the committee members. And I think it's self-explanatory, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any questions of Mike or Michelle as the co-chair? If there's no questions, I move that we note and report and receive the report from the Maori Committee.
Seconded.
Second. All those in favour?
Aye.
So I just took that off your mic. I shouldn't have done that. Okay, then we have item 14, coastal habits. Sheriff, do you want to comment on this?
Yeah, it's actually not really too much a report on, apart from that, from in the past we've had panel meetings to work with community and especially interested in people in the community to actually work and explain what we are planning to develop, and that they now have turned into workshops. We've had 3 of those such workshops, and they've actually have well attended. We've got some new people, and we would like to still more younger people to attend. But that actually is going really well. I'm really pleased with that. Chris is at the head of the table, who no doubt actually can give more information around that. Chris.
Yeah, well, the big news, of course, is that we've appointed our judge to help with a decision around the who should pay question. So that's Raynor Asher. So he's now on the case. On the 18th of January, he'll get a full briefing from our project manager, and we'll commence that process.
Does he get a chance to interview the chair of the Hawke's Bay Regional Council?
I'm sure he will.
Shall we let him near him?
So,
Well, I hope he presides sentence over the chair of the Hawke's Bay Regional Council Chair.
yeah,
I would
so
quite like to speak to him.
So we'll work through that. So part of the work that the project manager's doing is to define the detail of the process. And obviously we've got quite a tight budget, so we're going to work out how we can most wisely spend that, because he is a expensive resource, as you can imagine. But we'll make sure we get it right, and I'm sure we can socialise the actual plan of engagement.
Thank you. Is there anything else on the
That's the key one, I think.
Any,
And definitely it was unanimous from the joint committee, and they're right behind it, so the other two councils are also right behind.
They have
this
an
proposal.
independent view.
Yep, absolutely, yep.
Any questions of Joe or Chris?
I'm happy to second this report.
Okay, you're moving it?
I'm moving.
And
Seconded.
seconded. You don't speak further, Jerv? Rick? All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? It's carried. Civil defence. Where are we? I'll just report, because I was at the civil defence meeting and Ian's not here. The civil defence meeting which we have with all the mayors of the region, I guess it was this time, it was very much focused on because it was just prior to, not prior, just after the flood in Napier. So most of his report was very much focused on what they'd done. They had taken some criticism from sections of the public that they had focused on the Napier Hill and hadn't gone to the people in the lowlands, but there was such a lot of damage on the hill that that was high on their minds at the time. But they did a particularly good job. We also talked about that we passed a resolution from the regional leaders on the drought relief. There's a little bit of money left there, and they resolved to leave it there. And he presented his annual report. And I have to say that I think he does a really good job in balancing the books, Ian. And he manages to squirrel away enough money, which creates a fund, which he did last time, but that's probably not a sustainable approach because we're getting more and more disasters. We have the drought, and then we had the Napier incident, and we're bound to get something else in the next 12 months. So, you know, funds are going to be critical going forward. Any questions? Otherwise, I'll move that we accept that.
I'll second it.
Seconded by Rick. All those in favour?
Aye.
Could I just make one comment?
You certainly can. Now,
But before that,
missed you out.
I just want to say that I think the civil defence group in Hawke's Bay this year have performed admirably. They've gone from strength to strength. They've gained the respect of the community in a way which they haven't had for a long time, just because they've been in the shadows. But I think everybody now looks at the Hawke's Bay Civil Defence Group as being capable and competent, which is a very good thing. I'm very pleased with the progress.
Thank you, Rick, for that. Okay, now we have a bit of a session here. Item 16, minor items, not so minor. Michelle, do you wish to speak any more on your issue? Oh, you're going to speak on.
I've got two.
You're going to speak on.
So I'll do the wife baiting one first, and then James, I think James is going to answer
And
the
before Michelle goes, just want to acknowledge our guest, who is one of
Mr. Trevor Boyce.
Boyd, who is a famous whitebaiter, and he sat through our meeting to hear this, and really thank you for that. And Api, who has been on our back for the last few days about whitebaiting stands. So, floor is yours, Michelle.
He's a fellow member of the Māori committee. Api got a hold of me because Mr. Boyce, who is 91 years old and has been fishing on the harbour for 75 years, received a letter from Hawke's Bay Regional Council, Mark Brinston, Hawke's Bay Regional Council Ranger. And it's all around the stands, so apparently the access to putting your stand up before whitebaiting season, and then after that pulling your stand down within I think a couple of weeks. So this gentleman here, 91-year-old, received this notice telling him that he has to pull his stand down. He hasn't ever had to pull his stand down, and he's 91 years old. And I asked him how he built his stand. If you understand the river and you've been practicing mahi a kai for a long time, you know where to build your stand, how to build your stand, and how strong it is, and that no flood will take it away. My father, I watched my father build stands, and he's still got some of the stands been standing for 30 years. My own one's been standing for about 8 years, and it's where you put it and how you build it. So there seems to be an issue with him. He's been told that he has to pull the stand down, and that seems to be a problem. And I think, you know, when you're 91 years old, you shouldn't be demanding this old man pulls the stand down, especially when it hasn't dislodged with a flood. The other thing is, I understand also the same ranger also hassled a young 12-year-old whitebait fisherman, and the same thing, took away his net. So that's one issue. So these rangers, I can remember us talking about these regional council rangers, but I mean it's also a matter of, you know, it's like when a policeman pulls you up on the road and you go, oh, you know, you haven't done that, we go and fix it and bring it back and show me the evidence that you've done that. But you know, there's always some sort of lenience. I think when you're 91 years old and you've paid taxes, there should be some lenience. The other thing of concern is that I'm looking at your ranges, and I also, I knew Mike's brother well, Gordon Paku, and he was a customary officer under K-Regs regulations under the Fisheries Settlement Act. So, and he would also give permits of the freshwater as well as the sea. What I'm trying to understand is where, from a Māori point of view, where is mana whenua, where is the kaitiaki of those awa in all of this? It's a bit difficult. Now, if you, in Wairo, we have traditional fishing boundaries, but we share that with the community, so everybody gets a fair chance to get a kai. You get a bit of raru sometimes, but most of the time, there's plenty of river, there's plenty of room, and we never pull our stands down, because we also use those for fishing, jump off them when you're swimming, blah blah blah. But you know, I see that you've got cost to it. There's an annual fee, so it's a few things. Leave that 91-year-old man alone, poor thing. Don't make him pull out of the stand. And where are tangata whenua, mana whenua in this, all of this?
Thank you, Michelle. It's not our custom, but on this occasion, because of our guests, two guests up here regarding this yesterday, I'm going to ask James to respond to that.
So, removal of stands has always been a condition of the permits that we give for having a stand for whitebaiting. It's just never been enforced before. And so the issue that we have is that there's been a practice of leaving them in the river corridors and no enforcement. With the introduction of a ranger, we've now have some resource to enable us to ensure that the rules relating to the public use of our river berms is enforced. And so Mr Brinston is simply enforcing council policy as opposed to taking it upon himself to reinterpret the rules. The reason the rules exist is that the stands potentially provide a hazard to other water users, and that they can, that they also have a visual effect on the environment. And I appreciate the fact that there's been a cultural practice in this regard, which is long-standing. But of course our rivers are effectively ecological zones, not built environments, and we certainly have seen that over time some of the whitebait stands, indeed some of the duck shooting maimais on public land have been extensively developed to start to resemble mini holiday homes, if you like. And the more those structures grow, the more of a hazard they potentially become. And so Mr Brinston hasn't done this unilaterally. He's worked closely with the Department of Conservation, and we've held 2 public meetings, I think here in the Hiritonga zone. I don't think we've moved to take any action yet in the Wairoa catchment. And the public meeting was with all of the fishermen that we could get to those meetings, and this issue was raised, and so it was communicated that we would be starting to enforce these long-standing rules, and I understand that that had the overwhelming support of the majority of the people present. Look, this is a difficult one because it comes up against past and cultural practice, with also the normal sort of standards that we would expect for the use of a public environment. look, I personally, as a non-fisher, find it a bit of a stretch that people would have the right to go and erect some private property infrastructure on effectively a public river margin and expect that to be able to be there indefinitely. But indeed that appears to have been the cultural practice, and when you drive around Hawke's Bay and when you cross bridges and look up rivers, you see all sorts of structures, corrugated iron, posts sticking up and all sorts of things, which, to me seems odd, because I expect to see an entirely natural environment. But again, this has been past practice. So we recognise this is a transition, and we're very happy to work with the fishers, and in this case, very happy for the gentleman concerned to engage with our staff around how we can manage this. But ultimately, I think it would be a difficult policy decision for this council to take, to say that people can erect structures in the public river berms and they can be left there indefinitely. I think that does pose some issues. With respect to the comment that was made about a 12-year-old, I'm well familiar with that incident. There was illegal fishing taking place that was contrary to the Department of Conservation fishing regulations. Mr. Brinston spoke to the 12-year-old along with an adult with the Department of Conservation ranger present, and I have seen a detailed account of that, and I'm satisfied that both officers acted appropriately and were simply giving guidance in relation to the rules and what needs to be done to comply with those rules.
Okay, thank you. Neil, can you bring your thing in?
Yes,
when
I'm
you
quite
speak?
happy to, yes.
It's later,
Yeah.
because you've got a minor item.
Yes,
I still want this
I just
conversation.
need- yeah, I know it needs to be, but can I suggest that we give Mr. Boyce 10 years to remove the structure?
10 years.
No, I don't think so.
10 years, millions to remove your stand.
It's a very funny,
Come
elegant
on,
suggestion.
you're not going to make the
But
91-year-old.
we're not in debate here, guys. This is, so I'm sorry, we're not, no, I'm sorry you can't, because Michelle's represented you, and I think you've done really well representing you. So in this, we don't normally even have answers, so Councillor Curtin.
My apologies.
Yeah, and thank you, I accept your apology. We register his apology, please. So no, Michelle, it's not the answer you wanted, or your supporters.
There's one thing James missed though, Rick, because I did ask about, so there's mai pari te tai atu ki te raki rai, and that's the MPI kaitaki. Does the Hawke's Bay Regional Council Ranger overrule the customary fisheries officer?
No, he didn't say that actually. No, because the right to whitebait is very clear,
includes
but the right to leave the stand up all year round, he was also very clear on. So look, we need to move on.
We do.
Breaking your rules.
No, we are breaking rules. Neil, you're
Very
special.
briefly, Mr. Chair, in regard to the Napier flood response, I just wonder whether we can have a report back at the next opportunity in regard to the details of this expenditure and any issues to do with reviewing any further contribution.
That's fine. We'll report that back to the first meeting of council.
Thank you, Neil.
Going into the actions.
James, what were you having you about?
Discharge.
Oh, discharge, yeah. Do you want to 3 minutes on discharge?
So the chief executive has now got a minor item.
I announced that at the beginning of the meeting. You were dozing off or doing emails.
I'm just checking.
Yeah.
Just
On this
checking.
one occasion.
This is a breach of standing orders, just noting that.
It's my item though, but he's got to
Yeah.
update me.
Right, James.
So look, last Wednesday we were informed by the Wairoa District Council that they are having a wastewater overflow issue at Alexandra Park in Wairoa, which was discharging raw sewage into the river directly. Subsequent investigation has revealed that the change in ownership of the New World supermarket has resulted in 12 months of fat deposition in that facility having to be cleared out that hadn't been maintained on a regular basis. That resulted in a what's colloquially known as a fat berg in their system that blocked the wastewater system up and resulted in the overflow. And as I understand it, there has been some tardiness with respect to advising river users and the wider community of this fact, but I believe it has now been subject to media coverage, and so that the facts of this matter are currently under investigation by our compliance team. And perhaps additionally, I could just note that last week the Wairoa District Council was served an abatement notice and an infringement notice in relation to the performance of the Opotama wastewater system, which is not meeting its current consent conditions.
Thank you, James. Craig, your one item.
Thank you. I have a quick slideshow, which Leanne's going to
slideshow?
put up in a moment, but I'll lead into it.
You've got 5 minutes.
Councillors, I would like to see our Māori name given the same prominence and status as our English name of Hawke's Bay Regional Council in all our communications and branding. So if we have a look at our own website, our name is right up the top there, Hawke's Bay Regional Council, but then below that, if it does come up, is Te Kaunihara o Rohi o Te Matu a Maui. And I would very much like us to consider, it's the top left-hand corner, if you can squint, you can see that, and reflecting on the journey many of us are taking to reflect that closer partnership perhaps in all our branding and media releases. So you can see there, it does feature throughout our website and other communications, for example, down the bottom of that website. So the next evolution there. So I'd really much like us to consider going to, if you could do the next slide, Leanne, please, which is the Department of Internal Affairs, and many government departments actually have their two names, here we go, together, like, for example, like this, so we eventually end up something along those lines. It's complementary, there's a partnership there, and it just reflects the cultural values of the organisations, and I would like to think and hope of our council and our people. So I'd just like to rest that one on the table. And it doesn't mean huge rebranding or anything like that, but even various media statements in the name of the council and or the chair to use to Kahenira o Rohi o Te Matu a Maui in all our correspondence by default. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Craig. Good suggestion. Rick?
It has been previous practice where we had, before the council, a list of all the goima requests and what happened to them. I always thought this was a good thing to do because it meant that we were monitoring closely our constitutional obligations, because freedom of information is part of our constitution. I noticed that it slipped away. I wanted, can we have an explanation from the Chief Executive at some stage as to how that happened, why it happened, and also whether or not we should reinstate the practice.
So, Chair, I can give a very quick answer on that. It hasn't disappeared. It is attached as an appendix to the organisational performance report. At least that was the, I'm just looking at the very last, it might not have made the last.
But it used to come, it used to come in our papers.
It did. It's a good idea, James. I just thought we'd just take it. If it is there, we've missed it, but it was a good idea. Will, you had a...
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just wanted to mention, so the councillors were aware last week we had a gathering at the Lindsay Bush entrance to, I guess, bless and announce the funding that CHP Council and Waipakato Rotary had received, which is $750,000 to extend the mountain bike track. So when you travel over the Tukituk Bridge, looking to the left, there's quite a popular mountain bike track that's been created there over the last few years and proved very popular. And so now they've got this funding, employing 12 workers to extend the track to the right-hand side of the bridge, which will be a further 12 kilometres. Now all of that track will be on Regional Council land, and so while we're not required to add any funds, it will require council staff and time to cooperate and work in with that team. So yeah, and that includes the fixing a lot of the stop bank surfaces and building a bridge over one of the streams. So yeah, look, it's an exciting project to extend that mountain bike trail. Oh, the other extension is on the Regional Council land with the gum trees that, if you remember, a few years back was purchased, talking about the sewage, changing the sewage scheme down there. So that's now also a mountain bike park, and they're looking to extend trails through that land as well. So, yeah, just an exciting project and one that but we'll be very much involved in.
Thank you. Well, now that's the last of our minor items. And that's the end of our public meeting. We've got a workshop item which is going to take us 30 minutes. Patty, is it appropriate to close for the public? I think so.
Yes, I think so. Yes.
Can you close our meeting, please? Might mention white paper.
30 minutes,
We are going to
starting.
It's great.
break. Well, perfect. Kia tau, kia tātou katoa. Te ata whai o tātou ariki a i karaiti, me te aroha nui o te atua, me te whiwhinga tahitanga ki te wairua tātou.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much to our guests. And sorry, Api, I couldn't do that.
It's all good,
Yeah,
it's all good.
Māori committee, yeah, it's all good.
Bring it. Okay, Neil, are you leaving us? Not doing the
Very short,